And now it's time for AKS. Capsule has been also able to work on AKS, the managed service by Azure. And I'm really proud to say that there is a strong boundary between Azure and Capsule because we had the chance to work with the Azure people. And we are really happy for that because we are working together to create a baseline architecture to implement multi-tenancy on top of AKS. So you're getting powered by Kubernetes to deploy your applications. And this platform, this Kubernetes cluster, is going to be used by your tenants to manage the resources deployed in your subscription over Azure. So keep in mind that we already provided detailed walkthrough to get Capsule installed on Azure. And we have also mentioned as a viable solution to address multi-tenancy on Kubernetes by the official documentation of Microsoft regarding Azure. So give it a try. And if you spot any error, any problem, or you would like to get more tutorials on how to get this deep integration, you just need to open the pull request or talk with us. And we are really happy with that. As a small note, as usual, I created the cluster in advance just for the sake of timing. And there is a nice feature with AKS. Actually, I'm using CLI, but you can use Terraform, you can use Biceps, if I recall correctly, is the project that used by Azure peeps to manage resources. But AKS, there is a nice feature that is the enable Azure RBAC and the Active Directory admin group. So with these options, enable AAD, the Azure Active Directory, you can say that that cluster must belong to a specific user in the Active Directory. You know, Active Directory is an identity provider, can be used by Kubernetes for the authentication. So let's try to find the correct window. Yeah, this is. So this is the repository in CLASTIX coax Capsule over AKS baseline architecture. Feel free to store it, to fork it, to watch it, to open issues and read it through. And keep in mind that the cluster has been already created. So this is our dashboard. I created a cluster, the 120 with the version 122, and I got the integration with the Azure AD groups. So this is the group I'm using to specify the admin. So with this, we got a user that is the admin of the AKS. And starting from that, we are creating several groups. So this is the Capsule group that is connected to the cluster, to the AKS cluster, and is going to be recognized in order to say, if I'm a user in the Active Directory, I'm belonging to this group, and I can access the Kubernetes cluster because I'm part of the Capsule group and the Solar group. So we are creating a connection between the tenant concept and the group. So we got a tenant that is Solar group in the Azure Active Directory group, and then we got the tenant inside Kubernetes that is Solar. So with that said, we got also a user. I cannot change. Okay, just change tab. So we got the Alice at CLASTIX.io because with Active Directory, we have to use email addresses. And Alice is part of the group where it is. You're not able to see that, but it's part of this group. My coax Solar group. So what I have to do, I have to connect to the AKS cluster to install Capsule. So with that said, I'm unsetting the kube config, unset kube config. I'm touching TMP AKS, exported kube config to TMP AKS. And now what I have to do is to retrieve the credentials. So I have to perform the login and say, I would like to be the coax admin. I'm already logged in, so you just need to type the password. And with that said, beside the error, I can issue this command to get my credentials. So Azure AKS get credentials resource group that has been created in advance, AKS resource group. name my core AKS cluster and override existing. Okay, with that said, we are the cluster administrator of the cluster, because with this kubectl we are the cluster administrator, because if I issue kubectl get namespace, I have to authenticate for the first time. I'm saying that I am the admin. I'm trying to connect to the Active Directory, and here it is. So we got all our namespaces. Let me check if we clean up everything. It should be, in fact, what we have to do now is to install Capsule. So we have to install Capsule, and keep in mind that every cloud provider is specifying groups and the user groups in a different way. On AKS, on Azure, we are not using the name, but rather the IDs. So what I have to do is to say, I would like to install Capsule and make eligible any user that is part of this group, because we got our tenants that are part of the Capsule group, and the Capsule group is going to be bounded to the cluster. So with that said, what I have to do is to issue HELM upgrade install Capsule CLASTIX Capsule -n Capsule system, create namespace, although it's already there. And then I have to set a new option saying the manager options. Oh my gosh. Manager options Capsule user group. The first value must be the ID of this one. And now I just need to wait for Capsule for being installed on the Kubernetes cluster with the certificates required for the dynamic admission controllers and so on and so forth. It should take a few seconds. It's taking a while. Let's check. Ah, okay, it's there. That's great, because it means that if I issue kubectl get CRDs, we are ending up with our tenants. So far, so good. So now I'm going to use kubectl as Alice. So what I have to do is to issue AZ login, so Azure login, and I'm going to say I'm Alice. Okay, beside the error, it's not a big problem. I'm going to set AKS Alice export kubeconfig tmp AKS Alice. And now what I have to do is to retrieve my credentials. Okay, I should be Alice, because if I issue kubectl get namespace, I'm getting an error. Obviously, I need to log in, saying this is the code, and I'm Alice. Yeah, I'm trying to connect to the Kubernetes service Active Directory, and here it is. Alice cannot get the list of namespaces. But what happened if I try as Alice to create a namespace Solar development? Here it is. We cannot, because Alice is part of the Solar group that is registered in Capsule. So it means that the cluster administrator, the co-AKS admin, must issue the creation of the tenant. And as you can see here, we got our tenant, and we can create now our namespace. Oh my gosh, there is an error. Debug in real life. So you remember that we are Alice at CLASTIX.io. So what I have to do is to change the user. So it's not Alice, but it's CLASTIX.io, Alice at CLASTIX.io. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Because now, if I try to get the tenant and to watch it, I can create the namespace. Debugging in real life. It wasn't debugging, but let me brag that. So as you can see here, we are able to create a connection between the Azure Active Directory with Kubernetes in order to leverage AKS to be multi-tenant from day zero. And with that, you can create a platform on top of AKS. And with that, we are done with AKS. And